Smith Show starts right now.
Top running backs in the NFL see the handwriting on the wall. Melvin Gordon, Zeke Elliott, they want to get paid. They see exactly what the NFL thinks of their second and third contracts. They see exactly how they get used and dismissed. So if you're a top NFL running back, if your name's Melvin Gordon, if your name's Ezekiel Elliott, if your name's Saquon Barkley, how long until you hold out? How long until the New York Giants have to deal with Saquon Barkley's contract? It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, SiriusXM Channel 80, and on ESPN News, presented by Progressive Insurance. Will Kane filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on all those same ESPN outlets. Coming up on today's show, if I give you a 3-year window and I ask, which teams in the NFL have the best shot to win it all? Which teams do you like over the next 3 years? ESPN.com power ranked the entire league over a 3-year window, and I'll let you know where your favorite team came in. But it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. How long until Saquon Barkley holds out in New York? I don't ask that question because I'm trying to cause a controversy, because I'm trying to get into anybody's skin, because I'm trying to act like there's something to be seen when everything is copacetic in New York. I ask that question because it's coming. If you look at what's going on in the NFL right now, if you look at the running backs who are either holding out or rumored to soon be holding out, what you see is a clear message from the league and in turn by running backs. The message from the league is that running backs are interchangeable. That no matter how great you are, there's a sentiment that teams can get some semblance, some percentage of your production at some reduced cost. That we can find our James Conner to your Le'Veon Bell. Running backs, notoriously, when you look across the tables, the statistical and actuarial tables tail off at about the age of 24, 25. Running backs tail off right about the time they get that second contract. And that makes the NFL wonder, why do we pay for what they've done in the past? Why do we pay for right when the position tails off? Louis Riddick, ESPN NFL front office insider, was on Goal at Gowingo where he talked about this exact sentiment across the league.
We know that those guys are looked at like new automobiles when you drive them off the car lot. Their value depreciates immediately. Their value is never higher than what it is when you're drafted number 1 overall, or rather first round overall, and then you start taking NFL hits. It just starts to decrease from there. And I think teams know that. Teams see how you're able to get acceptable production from a percentage basis from guys who require much less in terms of compensation relative to what a franchise guy would require. And they're looking to go that route. They're going with the cheaper options now.
So if teams are going with cheaper options, if they're looking to replace running backs right when they get expensive, isn't that going to in turn force running backs to push their contract windows forward? Isn't that going to in turn force running backs to ask for more money when they're the most valuable? Now, it's Will Kane filling in for Stephen A. Any of you who have listened to me on the Will Kane Show or perhaps seen me on First Take know I'm not a lawyer in any way except by education, and I do have my bar license, but I haven't practiced law. But I do remember this from contracts law back at the University of Texas, and it's an old maxim that contracts are made to be broken. Now, look, set aside the moral argument. Set aside the concept that my word is my bond, that a handshake and some eye contact seal a deal. I believe in all those moral concepts. But when it comes to business, we have to understand the environment in which we're operating. Not everybody believes spitting in your hand seals a deal. Not everybody believes we should operate like John Wayne in the Alamo, ensuring that Davy Crockett and his forces will be there to back you up. Not everybody believes that is how business operates, and they shouldn't, because contracts legally are made to be broken. What I mean by that is there's mechanisms. They're not bonds. They are promises, and it's designed to get the most efficient business out of a relationship. What if the relationship is no longer equitable? What I mean by that is this. Saquon Barkley makes $8 million a year for the New York Giants. Is he more valuable than $8 million a year? The answer is yes. Is Ezekiel Elliott more valuable than $6 million a year to the Dallas Cowboys? He, rightfully, thinks the answer is yes. Running backs put in years of service, hard years of service, at times when they are underpaid. And when it comes time to actually get paid by the end of their contract, we see that increasingly the league is saying no. And nobody is doing anything wrong. Everybody is doing what incentive and business asks of them. And if NFL team sees that running backs tail off by the time that you pay them their second contract, and we know that just last year, 6 of your 10 highest paid running backs in the league missed time. Teams are doing what is right for them by declining to pay top dollar for a running back, by looking for cheaper options. So wouldn't a running back who is underpaid according to his ability and his services at the same time look to say, I want to go ahead and get paid? That's what Ezekiel Elliott is doing. That's what Melvin Gordon is doing. And by the way, I think they are in different situations. They are not in the same situation. A few days ago here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Kane filling in, we asked, is Melvin Gordon an elite running back? He is not. Ezekiel Elliott is. Melvin Gordon, over his first 4 years in the league, has one 1,000-yard season. It's also the only season in his 4 years in the league where he played a 16-game schedule. He rushed for 1,100 yards that season. He's a decent receiving back out of the backfield, but we're talking about 50-some-odd receptions. We're not talking about Le'Veon Bell-type numbers. Melvin Gordon is a good running back. He might even be a great running back, but he is not an elite running back. And Louis Riddick, again, ESPN NFL front office insider, was on this show yesterday with me where he said there's a funny little stat you should remember when it's talking about Melvin Gordon and his ability to negotiate a new deal with the Chargers.
If you're Chargers management too, Will, you're looking back at last year, and although obviously every game has its own specific context, they won every game that Melvin didn't start and play in last year. They were 4-0. So when you have those kind of things working against your leverage as the player, it just doesn't bode well in terms of you getting that record-breaking, not record-breaking, but that upper echelon contract, which in the case of running backs, we're looking at that $13, $14 million a year.
That upper echelon, though, would include Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. He's been in the league for 3 years, and 2 of those 3 years he's led the league in rushing. He's only been out for suspension, and he's rushed for 1,600 yards and 1,400 yards over those seasons. And last year, by the way, he caught 77 passes. Ezekiel Elliott has a different hand to play than does Melvin Gordon. Who gets paid? Melvin Gordon, Ezekiel Elliott? The odds are it's Ezekiel Elliott. And not just because of his production, but because of where he is in the contract window, taking us back to when is a contract to be broken? Ezekiel Elliott holding out, potentially, as rumors suggest and reports from Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio, Ezekiel Elliott could potentially do this season with the Dallas Cowboys, is cashing in or trying to renegotiate his contract when his value is at its highest. He's further away from that second contract window. He's further away from that age of 25. He's 23. Melvin Gordon is 26. He's further away from that statistical tail-off we see over and over again with NFL running backs. And Bobby Carpenter, ESPN's football analyst, was on Get Up where he said, yeah, Zeke might just get paid.
I'm not a big proponent of paying running backs, and I think this is why, and Zeke understands that. That's why he's holding out now, because Dak needs him at this stage in his career to still be able to have that type of success for their offense. If he chooses to wait till next year, he may be in the same situation that Melvin Gordon is. You talked about the window. Zeke sees it closing. It's time for me to try to get my money and not wait till another year till they'll have me pressed and they can use the option and potentially 2 more franchise tags.
Zeke has leverage. Melvin Gordon has less. Zeke's looking to break the contract where he is underpaid, and we have seen that in every sport. We certainly see it in the NBA, where contracts are no indication of where a player might be playing over the next several seasons. Paul George demands a trade 1 year into a 4-year deal. Anthony Davis with 2 years left on his deal. Across the NBA, we saw players force moves when they were contracted to a team for years to come. And in the NFL, we're seeing running backs looking to get paid in the middle of their contract because the one down the road that you hope to cash in on is increasingly less likely to happen. So I will ask you the question that I started with. When does Saquon Barkley begin his holdout? Zeke after his 3rd year. Saquon just finished his 1st year. I'm telling you down the road, if this is the continuing trend, that running backs respond to the market, respond to the league with asking for new contracts earlier. Don't be surprised when a top running back like Saquon Barkley pushes it up earlier and earlier into his tenure. That's Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. ESPN.com has a ranking up of the top teams over the next 3 years. Who's got the best window to compete for a title? ESPN NFL insider Field Yates joins me now. Field, what are you doing to me? You have the Cowboys 14th in your future power rankings, taking a look at the best teams over the next 3 seasons. How are they that low? Explain yourself, Field.
Well, first of all, it was a collaborative effort, so I don't want to take all the credit or face all the criticism for those future power rankings, Will. But what I will say is that the Cowboys right now are better than the 14th best team in the NFL. But as we know, no team is facing a larger, more looming cap situation than the Cowboys with all the stars that they need to pay. Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and Ezekiel Elliott are the most immediate contracts that require attention, but guys like Jalen Smith, Byron Jones, or just a number of other players that will also need to be paid. So the question is going to be, how do the Cowboys navigate that scenario while also being able to keep most of the core? Not all of it, because eventually you're going to have to let guys depart in free agency, but most of it, because if they can, they've got a much better case than being 14th in the NFL.
ESPN NFL front office insider Field Yates here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Kane filling in. Field, along with Louis Riddick and Kevin Seifert, have a ranking up over the next 3 years of NFL teams and their power rankings across the league. I do take some exception to the Dallas Cowboys being ranked 14th, mostly because, as they acknowledge, their roster is really good. And the problems you're talking about, Field, are good problems to have. How do we hang on to the level of talent we've accumulated? But one place I agree with you, man, is you give value to roster, quarterback coaching, front office, etc. You have the Dallas Cowboys ranked 31st in coaching. Jason Garrett certainly, I believe, over the last almost decade has earned that kind of confidence. But I wanted to ask you this, man, and I'm going to be talking about this a little bit later on the Stephen A. Smith Show. If you could have any coach in the league, Field, not named Bill Belichick, who would you pick to have over the next 3 years?
For the next 3 years, I'd go with Sean Payton. And I know that there are some compelling cases for coaches like Andy Reid. Sean McVay would certainly be in the conversation. You could look at the accolades of a variety of coaches that have either won Super Bowls or come close. But my answer is Sean Payton for the reason that I think that orchestrating an offense, he is about as good as there is in the NFL. I think he's an awesome in-game manager as well. And I think that Sean, having been around for so long, has shown that while he has offensive chops, that's his background, he's got full control of a roster and understanding the ins and outs of both defense and also special teams. So Sean Payton would be my pick if I had to choose one besides Bill Belichick. But I wouldn't push back too hard if you told me you're voting for someone like Sean McVay or Andy Reid. Yeah,
I think we should acknowledge who's probably in that debate. After Belichick, it is Sean Payton, Sean McVay, Andy Reid. I would also guess that many would put Pete Carroll in the conversation. NFL.com ranked their top coaches across the league field, and those were their top 5. They picked Pete Carroll as the quarterback, or rather the coach, to come in right after Bill Belichick.
Yeah, Pete's got an impressive resume as well. Now, part of the thing to keep in mind for these future power rankings is a 3-year snapshot. So that's factored into both Pete Carroll and also Jason Garrett for different reasons. Jason Garrett is entering the final year of his current contract with the Cowboys. It's pretty uncommon for coaches to coach into the final year of their contract. Oftentimes, what instead happens is an extension is reached. As Jerry Jones made clear at the beginning of the offseason, he's comfortable with Jason Garrett coaching out the final year of his contract, but that at least introduces the possibility of change. And with Pete Carroll, although he is incredible with his energy and his youthful exuberance at the age of, I believe, 67, there are still some that wonder how many more years is he going to continue to do this at the NFL level. It may be that he is very much on the final few years of his coaching career.
Let's stay on the Seahawks for a moment. Talking to ESPN NFL insider Field Yates here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. In this 3-year window power ranking, there are 2 teams, Field, that I think you and Seifert and Riddick overranked, gave a little bit too much credit. And I want to push back on you and see what you have to say. One is the Seahawks. Okay. You guys have the Seahawks at 5th over the next 3 years. And they do have some things to give them confidence, give you confidence in them. That is, they have Russell Wilson, they have Pete Carroll, they have a good front office. But they also have a roster that I think has serious questions about it. It's a roster that has not won its division, at least not last year, and I thought got handled pretty easily in the playoffs by the Cowboys. What is it about the future for the Seahawks that looks brighter to you than where they've been in the present, essentially?
You know, Will, I'm not sure any team has seen more talent depart over the past 2 off seasons than the Seahawks. Guys like Richard Sherman, guys like Earl Thomas this past off season, players that were hallmark players on a championship roster and a team that went to the Super Bowl in back-to-back years are gone. And yet the Seahawks never ended up rebuilding. They just retooled. They reloaded. And so a lot of these future power rankings is the belief in the infrastructure that let's say the Seahawks lose somebody else amongst their very talented veteran players that have been there for a while. Do you trust the front office to be resourceful enough to replace that player and do so in a way that is efficient and does not compromise the rest of the roster? I think the Seahawks have done a pretty admirable job of that. If you look at some of the guys that were at no point during the Legion of Boom's peak, the players we were talking about, that they have found utility out of. They've been able to replace some of the key members in that secondary. They've been able to rebuild that defensive line, and you're seeing players like Jaron Reed, for example, who has gone from a second-round pick that was viewed as just a run stuffer to maybe a legit $10 or $12 million per year defensive tackle if a new contract is reached at some point here for him soon. So I just believe in the people that are running the show out there in Seattle. And the quarterback is really good. As we talk about often, Russell Wilson gives you a chance every single Sunday.
You know, what's funny is I feel like the second team I felt was overrated in your cumulative power rankings over the next 3 years as well might have a similar analysis. I might end up hearing the same things from you about infrastructure and talent replacement. But I am surprised to see the Pittsburgh Steelers come in at number 6. Now, here's the deal, Field. I believe people have thrown dirt on the Steelers entirely too early. They've anointed the Browns entirely too early. That being said, how you describe the Seahawks as a roster in transition, or they've seen talent leave Seattle, we've seen the same thing in Pittsburgh. We've seen talent leave Pittsburgh, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown. So for them to come in at number 6, is that the same thing? You're telling me you believe in their ability to replace that kind of talent in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I think certainly no one has drafted wide receivers better than Kevin Colbert of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, the number of players that he's found, not even in round 1, that have become really talented wideouts in the NFL is ridiculous. Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown, obviously Juju Smith-Schuster, Martavis Bryant was a 4th-round pick who was very good when he was actually able to be on the field for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So there's hope in guys like James Washington this year. Can they find something in Dante Moncrief where they signed in free agency? I like the people that have been running the show there for a long time and their ability to continue to replace key pieces. For the Steelers, though, one thing I will say here, Will, is that, it's been a while since they have not just, it's one thing to reach the AFC Championship game as they did 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago, But it's another thing to be the best team in the AFC. So there's a case that the Steelers need to kind of up the ante a little bit here, and I'm not sure it gets any easier with the division that I know you referenced. Maybe it's too soon to be crowning the Browns of anything, but the Browns have certainly made noted strides this offseason. It's going to be a much more difficult path ahead for the Steelers this year as compared to where it may have been in previous seasons.
ESPN NFL front office insider Field Yates, or rather NFL insider Field Yates here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Hey, man, so Melvin Gordon wants an extension or a trade. There are rumblings now that Ezekiel Elliott may not show up for training camp unless he has a new contract in Dallas. Do you think these two running backs are A, in the same position field, and B, going to get paid?
No, I don't think they are, Will. I don't think they're in the same position, is what I would say. I start there. Production-wise, both have had outstanding numbers. I do think that they're in two different classes, though. I believe that Ezekiel Elliott is a notch above Melvin Gordon. And I think that if you look at how the offenses have run during the apex of their respective careers over the past 3 seasons, Melvin Gordon had sort of a forgettable rookie season with the Chargers. It's clear that the Cowboys offense has operated through Ezekiel Elliott. We saw the impact of him not being there when he had a 6-game suspension he served, and the team's offense looked dramatically different. He has more leverage from an on-field perspective. However, he is in a position, as we talked about a little bit earlier, where there are so many other Cowboys that need to get paid that even if he wants something in the range of $15 million per year, the Cowboys may say, we simply cannot at this point. We've got too many other deals that are coming due sooner than that we need to take care of those first. So I think that Zeke has the better resume, but I'm not sure that he has as much leverage for his respective team. I still think that Gordon probably is going to have a hard time getting the deal that he wants, but I think they're kind of in different buckets.
I told you that Field Yates, Louis Riddick, and Kevin Seifert have the Seahawks at 5, the Pittsburgh Steelers at 6 to round out their top 10 of teams over the next 3 years. Power ranked across the NFL, the Los Angeles Chargers come in at 10th, the Cleveland Browns at 9th, the Los Angeles Rams at 8th, the New Orleans Saints at 7, and jumping up to the Kansas City Chiefs at 4, the Philadelphia Eagles at 3, New England Patriots at 2, and the Indianapolis Colts as the number 1 team over the next 3 years. My one last question for you, Field Yates, is this. It always happens in the NFL. Somebody jumps out of nowhere. We often see worst to first stories when it comes to division titles. And I think Super Bowl contenders often spring up quickly and out of nowhere, like the Chicago Bears over the last year or so. If there's one team that's not in your top 10 that you might keep your eye on, that could surprise everybody, that we should make sure to watch, who would that be?
Take a look here one more time. Did we mention? I got to pull the list back up here, Will. Did we mention the Atlanta Falcons in the top 10? Because if not, that's a team that I think merits some consideration here in the top 10. This is great radio here, not knowing my own rankings 1 through 10.
You have the Falcons you have the Falcons at 15th, and I think that's a great 15. Nomination, by the way. Yeah, perfect.
And that's a team that has enough talent to be really, really successful this year. Keeping it all together beyond this season is interesting. They got to pay Julio Jones. They got to pay Deion Jones. They just paid Grady Jarrett. But for 2019, you better believe the Atlanta Falcons are going to be a force to be reckoned with.
All right. ESPN NFL insider Field Yates on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Thanks, Field.
Thanks, Will.
All right. There's Field Yates, brought to you by the new Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline, now with 4 levels of defense against gunk, wear, corrosion, and friction. Yesterday, when we were hanging out together here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, I had a caller call in and say the NFC East was the worst division in the NFL. That's ridiculous. I'll tell you the worst division, and I'll tell you this. It doesn't have a single Super Bowl contender in the entire division. That's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Will Cain filling in. Hey, when you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. Search for greatness. Search for Indeed. Nature Valley Sweet and Salty Bar.